Welcome to the Wine Yogi. I'm your guide, Crystal, and I'm here to help you navigate your way through the wonderful world of wine and all its heady associates, craft beers, spirits, and gourmet foods, with the knowledge of a sommelier, the sometimes calm patience of a yoga instructor, and of course the wacky humor of a former Air Force pilot, stay-at-home mama, and a girl raised in the South. So let's get chatting about wine. Welcome to this episode of the Wine Yogi. So today we're going to cover, as promised, some of the wines that I would like to offer up for your consideration for your Easter table. But before we get to that, I have some disheartening news to share, but I know y'all will kind of appreciate why it's kind of heart-wrenching. And it was compounded by what happened in Paris with the loss of parts of Notre Dame, one of my all-time favorite cathedrals. I love Paris. It's probably my favorite. It is my favorite city in the entire world. But I'm entering Holy Week, and it's already been tough. So I'm trying to keep things in perspective because what's happened to me, it was extremely emotional and awful, but not as awful as what this week represents to those of the Christian faith. But let me just explain to you what's going on. My husband and I last week went to Ojo Caliente. In fact, I did a quick recording to introduce a YouTube video that you'll hopefully see soon, posted up at our Ladies Chit Chat Club YouTube channel. And we had an amazing time. The Healing Waters of Ojo Caliente, which is right outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's in between Santa Fe and Taos. Absolutely amazing. And I felt awesome, relaxed, reconnected with my husband. We had just a fantastic time. We come home, and when we had left to go down there, it was really, really warm. But then we were having a forecasted bomb cyclone part 2 here in Colorado. So we were going to have about a 60-degree temperature change, snow, everything, just another blizzard, essentially. And so I had set our thermostat over to heat because we knew it was going to get really cold and didn't want the house to get that cold. So unbeknownst to me, something happened with our thermostat. We came in after 2.5 days, and that furnace had been on full blast. It was probably over 100 degrees in the main part of our house. Definitely 110 plus in our upstairs, and in the 80s in our basement, which is pretty tough to do. I'm not looking forward to seeing the gas bill from that. So I get all the doors and windows open, and I am already worried about my wine. I have an extensive collection that I have been basically building for probably the last, it's now going on 13, 14 years. The oldest bottle I have is a 2006 Cab Sav. Anyway, I go into the office, which is the coolest place in our main floor, and it's where I store most of my wine in cases. And I'm like, what is so sticky on this floor? Because it happens to be my son's classroom as well. And I'm like, there's something sticky all over the floor. He must have had something in a bag that leaked out due to the heat. And then I started looking around because that's why I went in there, was to check the wine. And I noticed there were corks on the floor. And I'm like, oh my God. So I start looking even closer. I have had wine bottles explode. Corks have flown. Wine has poured all over a very expensive wood floor that is now warped thanks to that. So I start cleaning up all of this. And then I start looking at the wine. And what has happened is the wine has gotten so hot that it has compromised the corks and come through. So in the case of certain wines, it turned into like it's think about when you put like balsamic vinegar on a stovetop and you're cooking it down and it gets super syrupy and the sugars really begin to coalesce together as the alcohol, or in the case of the balsamic, the acid is cooking off. Well, that's what happened with my wines. So I had wines where you could literally see it through the foil, where the wines had seeped through. I began pulling foils off to check, what was the damage. I already knew that the wines were all cooked, and that's bad enough. And I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to explain what does that mean for the wines that didn't have compromised corks. But I started pulling off foil after foil after foil, and some of them, the corks were already starting to push out of the bottles. Some of them were sopping wet with wine. You could smell the wine, had that vinegar smell. I was in tears at this point. And so as the house began to cool down enough, and I started moving all these wines in front of doors, I started getting the ones that looked like corks were getting ready to blow to a safe place in case they did. And I started pulling foils off. And I went to the most expensive wine in my collection, which retails for about $500. I had hoped to lay it down for at least 5, if not 10 more years. And unfortunately, I have now drank that $500 bottle of wine. Now, I didn't pay $500. Remember, I am in this business, but I still paid a pretty penny for it. But as I started going through my wine collection, more and more of my very nice wines, I realized, were compromised. The corks have been compromised. And what does that mean? So once that wine breaks through and that cork has expanded and contracted so much that wine has now leaked out of it. And you can always tell that a cork has been compromised when you take off a foil and there might be a little bit of stickiness residue around the foil. It could be a little wet. Or the cork itself, maybe it's dried at some point, but the cork has wine seeping all the way through to the end, to the top where you actually put your wine key or your corkscrew in to pull the cork out. And as I'm pulling all of these off and I'm seeing wine, in my head, I am doing the calculations, and I already know that we're going to have to drink through this entire collection over the next few months. But these wines, we're going to have to drink now, because once those corks are compromised, oxygen is now beginning to interact with the wine and it's going to start to oxidize. So you're going to start losing things. One of the first things I find that can go with oxidized wine is the fruit. So if you have nice big jam notes that you like in a certain wine, that may be the first thing that is missing. Things start to have almost a raisin characteristic to it. And then finally, everything starts to flatten out. So if you've ever had wine that 3 days later, for example, let's say you open a bottle of wine on Friday night and you forget about it and you still have wine in the bottle, and on Monday you're like, oh my God, I still have wine. That rarely happens in my house, I'm going to be quite honest. But I have had that experience. And so when you kind of forget about it and then you go back and you taste it, it just tastes flat. It tastes, it has no sparkle. It has no acid. The acid's gone. The tannins are they can do several things. Sometimes the tannins just take over and all it is just, a bunch of chewy, tannic, hot mess garbage because there's no fruit. The alcohol, is pretty much gone because it's completely breathed off. And it just enhances kind of all the icky things that if it was a wine that was already not your favorite to begin with, it to me just enhances everything that you might dislike about that particular wine. So I busted out my Coravin, which the running joke in my family has been, why did your parents give you a Coravin? Coravin is a pretty expensive wine tool that uses a needle that punctures through the cork to withdraw wine without actually breaking that seal to introduce oxygen, and it uses argon gas to go back in and fill in the hole and fill in the bottle so that the wine itself isn't in contact with oxygen. So I started going through and I started Coravin in a lot of these wines, and I would pour out just enough that I could determine, okay, it's already oxidized, it's not drinkable. I've only had, out of all the wines I've Coravined thus far, I've only had 3 that have been kind of like, ew, That's not good. One of them we just kind of forced. It was a $200 bottle of wine from a vineyard that was destroyed in the Napa Valley fire a couple years ago. So we just drank most of it. I'm gonna use the rest of it to cook with. Do some type of beef bourguignon. I did take another one, a Burgundy, and I cooked a bison roast in it and did beef bourguignon. Right now in my glass I have a 2007 Dancing Bear from Cakebread. So it's Howell Mountain. It's a blended cab coming from Cakebread, and it's oxidizing, like it's starting to lose its fruit. But I'm no quitter, and I refuse to let this wine go to waste because I love the wines produced by Cakebread Vineyards. So I refuse to let this one go to waste. I'm going to drink it all if I have to drink it by myself, because my husband has to prep for his colonoscopy. So no wine for him. But we've been drinking a brick of wine. And it was Saturday. I was supposed to be doing a class, and after my yoga class, and I couldn't. I needed to go home and go through more of my collection. So you're looking, probably I would say about $10,000 of an investment in the wines that we have in our house. And it's a complete loss, because even the wines that did not have their corks compromised, so there's no indication that seal was ever broken. No wine seeped through. The corks themselves, when you pull the foil off and you look through the neck, are in perfect shape. They have been exposed to such a high heat that they're going to start to turn to vinegar. You can't lay them down and age them anymore. But I triaged my wine so that I knew what we were going to start with and start working our way through. And so in the last 4 days, I have probably drank upwards of $2,000 worth of wine, because I'm no quitter. And I did have a chance to kind of work through my emotion, because I was very emotional on Saturday. And I also realized I could start giving a lot of these wines to my friends, especially the ones I'd Corvin and verified they were still good. And with the promise of, please drink them now. Don't. This is not a gift to sit aside and lay down for a long time. Drink it tonight. Drink it in the next few days. And so that was one way of easing my heartache, knowing that it was going to people that love me, understand why I'm so upset and heartbroken, and will enjoy the wine. And whether they enjoy it or not, they're at least telling me they do, so that puts me at ease a little bit. We're also going to turn them into some amazing candles. So the owner of the wine store I work at upcycles wine bottles, and so we're going to produce some gorgeous candles with these bottles. And then finally, I came to the realization that this is certainly one way to start making room for new wines to explore, and to, because I'm very reluctant to buy wine in bigger purchases. So now, especially as we start planning our 20th wedding anniversary, where we are going to go to France, and then that brings me to Notre Dame, at least now I know I will have space in not only my heart, but also in my collection for new wines, for new discoveries. And when we finish our basement, a new cellar that's going to be completely on its own thermostat, separate from my house. And it will also have its own humidity control. So that is definitely on the list of honeydew things. So that's my heartache. Share that with you. We're going to work through it. We're going to get through all of these wines. And I am bound and determined to make Easter. We're going to have some freaking fantastic wines for our Easter celebration this Sunday. And I can tell you what's going to be on our table. A lot of Cab Sav. A lot of Cab Sav, Cab Franc. I'm a Cab girl. So the in-laws, Mother's Day, my sister-in-law, happy Mother's Day. Here's a bottle of Cakebread Cab Sav. 2010. Enjoy it in the next couple, next month. Maybe tonight. Same thing, for my other sister-in-law. Happy Mother's Day. Here you go. So enough of that. So you know what I'm going to have at my Easter table. But let's talk about some wines that you might want to consider that are going to pair nicely with whatever it is you're having for Easter. Now, traditionally, a lot of times folks choose to either have a ham, leg of lamb is common, or a turkey. So we've already offered and discussed a couple of white options. Any rosés are starting to make their appearance right now. So there are some great rosés out there. I would look for If you are into rosés and enjoy them, certainly looking for rosés coming out of the old world, out of France in particular, whether it's Provence, the Rhone River Valley, you can't go wrong with those rosés. The winemakers, particularly in the old world, tend to produce rosés that hold true to the standard for rosé, and that is that it's not sweet. It is a lighter, more acidic version of the red wines that you enjoy. So if you look for some of the rosés out of the Languedoc region, or the Provence region, the Côtes du Rhône, these areas are going to produce some lovely rosés that should pair with whatever you're putting out on your table. But especially if you're doing something like turkey, which has that tryptophan, it can be kind of heavy, or the ham because of the saltiness. Now, I'm going to make some suggestions about red wines that you can consider pairing. I'm actually doing a pork shoulder with endive that I'm going to take down to my sister-in-law's just for something new. And we're going to pair it up with some cake bread cab sauv. The pork shoulder itself, the way it's going to be cooked, balsamic vinegar is going to be involved. It's going to have a heavy enough flavor profile and umami profile that the wine itself isn't going to overpower it. And so it's going to pair very, very nicely. But we usually have some type of Italian meal because I'm married into an Italian family. We often will have ham at our Easter table, and there is frequently a leg of lamb. So when you're looking at things like lamb and ham, I always want something with some acid. Okay, I don't want super tannic wines. You if that's what you like, go for it. But especially when you're talking about the saltiness of ham or the gaminess of lamb, I like a little bit of acidity that triggers that saliva gland to help kind of rinse the mouth so that the salt isn't intensified or that gamey factor isn't intensified. So I tend to look to Pinot Noir is one of the classic pairings with lamb, and it certainly pairs beautifully with any type of hams, whether it's country, Virginia, whatever type of ham you're doing. Pinot Noir is a classic go-to. And I would offer, if you're going to do an American Pinot Noir and you don't want to spend a lot of money, consider looking in the Sonoma River Valley, Russian River Valley. They're producing some beautiful Pinot Noirs. You can typically find really quality Pinot Noir coming out of there, or Chardonnay, as a matter of fact, as well, out of the Russian River Valley for $20 and under. They are smaller, more boutique wineries there. So go to your local wine store, see what they've got from the Russian River Valley, and give them a shot. I tend to like Motion is a favorite, Motion Vineyards. And I like both their Chardonnay. I love their Rosé of Pinot Noir, which they just released. And I love their Pinot Noir. And you have different levels of Pinot Noir too. So you can certainly move up to a higher quality of Pinot Noir. If you like bigger Pinot Noirs that have a little bit more tannic structure, that's always an option too, coming out of Russian River Valley. Most of these vineyards are going to offer kind of that entry level wine, and then they'll build from there. And that's when you start getting into their reserves or their libraries or their selects. And when you see terminology like that, sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's indicative of they are sourcing the grapes maybe from one particular area. The cake bread I'm enjoying right now, as I'm recording this, for example, is specific to Howell Mountain in Napa Valley. So they're only pulling the grapes from this one particular area. But let's talk about another option for you to consider that is kind of unique and has a really interesting story that I think is pretty awesome given the time of year and the holiday that folks are going to be celebrating on Easter Sunday. So there is a very unusual and obscure grape coming out of Italy. You can either get it from the Venice appellation, the Friuli, so it's kind of over on the eastern side of northern Italy. And it's called Piccoli Neri. You can also see it as Piccolo Nero, Piccoli Nero, but it is produced by only a few winemakers. Emilio Bulfon, Bulfon, is probably the most famous of the Piccoli Neri production, and it's a grape that was almost extinct, and Emilio Buffon is one of those winemakers that wants to bring back these grapes that have kind of disappeared, either because of difficulty in growing them, just disease, whatever has come close to wiping some of these original Vitis vinifera, these older varietals, out. There are certain winemakers out there who want to come and bring them back from extinction. So it's this, as the story goes, Emilio Buffon found some of these vines, just a few of them, in a tiny alpine village right at the foothills, and it's near this river valley. And he now has a little bit of acreage, about 35, 40 acres, and he devotes half of it to growing all these rare varieties that come from the Friuli region. And so his story, so Piccoli Neri means small black, so the very small grapes, they're almost blue and very, very dark, so kind of think that midnight blue. And the skin is somewhat, I wouldn't say it's thin, it's described as waxy, but they are pretty tightly packed. And these, the story is this was a very popular Roman grape varietal. So why is this an Easter wine? Well, one of the bottles that is pretty famous actually depicts a triptych of the Last Supper. So as we're coming up to Maundy Thursday, so that is, the Last Supper, where Jesus is said to have broken the bread, blessed the wine, creating that connection with his disciples and with his followers. It is said, and again, this is marketing, because it's kind of going to be difficult to prove, obviously. That'll be one of my questions. Have you ever thought about when you finally reach your destination, your final resting place? Because I believe in the afterlife, and I believe where I'm going to go. And I'm going to see my family and friends, my beloved ones. I'm going to meet my maker. I'm going to have some questions. Why the platypus? That's why. What was that all about? What was in it? What kind of wine was it? What was the wine that you turned from water to wine? What was that? I got to know. And I'll probably just be told to be quiet, move along now. But I'm still going to ask. So it is said, though, that this was a very, very popular grape varietal that the Romans frequently had as their wine. And it was grown throughout the Roman Empire, particularly in the Mediterranean regions. And that this particular wine was most likely the wine that could have been used at the Last Supper. So the nice thing is this wine has pop and acidity. It is, because it has that darker fruit, it definitely has a very dark color in the glass. And it's has some notes of vanilla. It has a little bit of floral, going on, but not overpowering to the point that that's all you're tasting. And it's got this beautiful violet color with that backdrop of ruby red, that blood red. And you'll definitely get chestnut, vanilla, just really, really nice. I get a little bit of green herbs on it, so some rosemary. So that's why I think, in my personal opinion, because of all the different flavor profiles going on in this wine, it makes a beautiful pairing with roasted lamb. So if you're doing like a leg of lamb, or maybe you've taken garlic, rosemary, and olive oil as a rub on the lamb itself, this wine with lamb, because of that acidity, because of the fruit notes going on with it, it really helps balance out that flavor profile of lamb, which can impart a bit of gaminess to it. So if you are looking for something that has, at least in the stories, in the old wives' tale, if you will, or the old winemaker's tale, a connection with what's happening this week and with the resurrection, perhaps consider looking for Piccoli Neri. And I'm going to include a link as part of this podcast so that you can at least look and see what the label looks like, and you can take it to your local wine store and see if they have it. This is also one of my favorite wines to have around Christmas time. Again, it's very drinkable, balanced acidity. It's not too tannic. So again, if you're doing it, it would stand up with prime rib, any of those kind of fatty dishes because of the acid. I think it does very, very well with, and again, a lot of people have turkey or ham. It's a red wine that isn't going to overpower those standard main dishes that you find on your holiday table. The other nice thing about it's under $20. So you're not really going to spend a whole lot of money on these particular wines. They're small production. Nobody knows what it is, so they can't really charge $100. Maybe after, I make them famous and the demand increases, who knows. But take a look for Piccoli Neri. If that sounds a little too, whoa, I don't know if I want to try that. Definitely look for a favorite Pinot Noir. Now, there are some other options that you consider, just briefly as I kind of wrap up. Zinfandel, depending on what type of sauce, if you're having ham, maybe you like to do it in a particular type of sauce with maybe cherries or even like a barbecue sauce as you're preparing it. Zinfandel with pork is always a good option, but it's really going to depend on the sauce. So you need to look at what you're having with the pork. If you're just doing plain ham, you could certainly find some Zinfandels out there that have enough blackberry and black pepper on them and acidity, because they tend to be a medium tannin, medium minus medium acidity kind of red wine. So again, they're easy drinking for what you're putting on your table. Wouldn't be my first go-to if I were serving lamb, but certainly if I had some type of a pork dish, whether you're doing pork shoulder or any type of barbecue, if you're maybe serving barbecued ribs, things like that, Zinfandel would be a nice different option to bring to the table. In my case, we always like to really enjoy high-end, nice, beautiful cabs. Our family, for the most part, we all really enjoy Cabernet Sauvignon. So most of the wines I'm bringing down, I am bringing down a Syrah blend from Schaefer, which is a wine producer out of Napa that also had some damage from the Napa Valley fire. So I'm bringing down one of their Syrahs. Thankfully, the other red blends and the cabs that I had were down in my basement. Their corks were not compromised. So I was pretty stoked about that. I'm also bringing a Syrah Shiraz from John Duval out of Australia. So he is one of the winemakers for Penfolds Winery. You may have heard of Penfolds. He has his own label now, his own production, and almost all of his wines were compromised. So we'll make do. It's all going to get drunk. It will be a joyful celebration, regardless of how the wine tastes, simply because we will be gathering together as a family. Easter Sunday actually happens to be my actual 18th wedding anniversary. My husband's going to be flying, so I'm kind of bummed about that. But like I said, we've had a great time despite kind of the disappointments and the losses, at least in terms of wine, that we've suffered. But I'm glad it happened during this week, because as Lent is wrapping up and I'm kind of thinking about, I gave up Starbucks. I gave up fast food. I gave up swearing. Okay, now I'm going to admit there was some swearing taking place when I walked into this house, and it was 100 freaking degrees. I was very upset. and so I paid my money into the rice bowl that goes to Catholic Charities. So, sorry, not perfect. But one thing that this experience has done for me is again to put things in perspective of, I didn't sacrifice anything. These are first world problems. I don't worry for where my food is coming. I don't worry about a roof over my head. I sure as heck know that I will be warm when I need to be. That was proven. I don't I don't have to worry about basic necessities. I am so rich, not only in spirit, in family, and compared to the rest of the world, in just monetary things, that I can cry over spilt wine. And I can be emotional and attached to things like that. So what an amazing life I have been blessed with. So one of the things that I have done with my meditations this week and my yoga practice and everything like that, then with what was happening as I watched Notre Dame burn, is that it has given me a chance to reflect on all of the amazing things that I am grateful for, no matter how small. And it's put things, as I said, into perspective when I think about my faith and the sacrifices that were made for me. And it was transformative to go through something that was so disappointing and so upsetting. And to find that I could let it go. Holding on to that regret was not going to serve me. It was only going to make me sad, and it was only going to make me feel bad. It was only going to make me ruminate over, I should have not turned the heater on. I should have just left it off or left it on cool and just dealt with a cold house. All of that that was going on in my head last week and through the weekend. I haven't had that. I can sleep okay. And it's because all of this has brought into perspective how truly blessed I am. So with that, if you celebrate either Passover or Easter, I wish you a wonderful, joy-filled rest of your week and weekend. If you don't, I hope wherever you are at, you are able to enjoy the weather, friends or family, and just have a really special time. Take a moment just to kind of look around and go, you know what? No matter how bad things may seem, whether it's at work, in relationships, whether it's your workouts aren't working and your body still just looks like the middle-aged mom that you are. I'm right there with you. Or that maybe the diet's not working. All of those things. Find that joy in the midst of things that seem so upsetting, so frustrating. Things that, evoke anger. The dude that cut you off and flipped you off as if it was somehow your fault for being on the highway. Whatever it is. Try to find some perspective in the joy that, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm upset over fill in the blank. Or at least I know that my friends and my family all love me, and it's been so sweet to see the outpouring of support and love as I'm grieving for these losses of these wines that I've been holding on to. But I hope and I wish for you that you're able to find some solace, no matter what else is going on. Even if it's just taking a moment to enjoy the sunshine on your face, the smell of fresh lavender that's coming into bloom, or maybe the other flowers that are coming up out of their winter rest, or the trees whose leaves are now starting to come forth, green grass, whatever it is, smell of cut grass, all those things. Find something that you can smile about and focus on that. Let all that other stuff go. It'll still be there for you when you need to go back and worry about it. It'll still be there. Take a moment and find some joy. So until next time, with joy and abundance in my heart, with wishes for a blessed Easter, Passover, or just a great weekend. Cheers and namaste. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Wine Yogi. Please be sure to check out IamTheWineYogi.com for any updates to my schedule, current yoga classes that I'm offering online, and of course, wine tastings. Also, please be sure to subscribe to this podcast so that you can get updated on all the latest and greatest Wine Yogi podcasts. Until next time, cheers and namaste.